So talking about that, so your nervous system is getting hit with all of the stress, a stressor that cannot be changed. It's a permanent thing that has now happened. This can impact sexual arousal. This can impact desire. People are going to assume that means that your desire and your arousal lower. That is not entirely true. It can be either or neither. Okay. So first talking about how stress and grief specifically, because it's like the deepest kind of stress. For those who feel a lower desire or feel like their desire has changed in some way, it's become a little bit pickier, a little bit more responsive. The stars have to align a little bit more. That is the most common response we see, but that does not mean that is the only response. That's the one that people just assume that when you are grieving, your desire goes down. That's not true. We'll talk about that in a second. But for those who are hearing that and saying, yes, that's me, that's very common, right? Because again, your body is so stressed out, it's barely wanting to, especially in the beginning, it's barely wanting to eat. It doesn't want to drink water. It doesn't want to move. It doesn't want to laugh. Oftentimes it doesn't want to have sex, whether that's solo sex or partnered sex. Sex for many, and what I advocate for, is that sex is a pleasure activity. That's not what it's only for, but we do want it to be as pleasure oriented as people can be. That it's not how it's been taught to people, but that's what we would like sex to be. Is yes, it can make babies. Yes, it can bring closeness. Yes, it serves many functions, but it is supposed to be this thing that like we can seek pleasure from. Your body is not seeking pleasure in many of the things it used to seek pleasure in after you've experienced loss, right? And this obviously becomes even more tangled and complicated depending on what your loss was. If it was a partner, of course, not only did you lose the person you're grieving them, you actually lost the person that you were sexually active with, right? Assuming if there was monogamy, right? If it was like this exclusive relationship. So we have neurotransmitters changing, hormones are changing, possibly pumping your body with all these things that basically kill libido, take desire down. As you can see, it's impacting elsewhere, but maybe your appetite comes back because that's a drive, that's hunger. Your thirst comes back because that's a drive, that's thirst, that might return, right? You do eventually have to sleep, whether that's help with medication or whatever you use, you do have to sleep because that's a drive. Sex is not a drive. You hear sex drive. You don't die without sex. People have maybe tried to convince you otherwise. I've heard a lot of the dramatics behind it, but you don't die without sex. So while all these things return out of survival, this one does not always easily return for people because you won't die without it. So the body kind of backburners it in a way because it's not like totally needed. Again, people will want to argue on that, but we do know like people will not die without it. So that's why, we can compare it to food and we can compare it to all this, but like that eventually comes back for folks, or they go to therapy and it helps it return. They might take medication, they might have to do something, eventually their appetites return, all this, but their desire and their arousal might stay quite low. That can last weeks, that can last months, that can last years, right? It's actually transformed like your baseline entirely. And then on the other side of that, this is the part that I think people can also feel shame around, not just shame around their desire lowering and them wondering where their sexual identity is and them struggling to connect. Or, maybe they're with a partner still and their partner's libido did not change. And now there's a desire discrepancy or a gap. On the other side of that, there's also a lot of shame about folks whose desire increased. So you'll hear this with the widow's fire. You can hear, like, I know I talked to a lot of people who have lost their children or pregnancy loss, and they feel a lot of shame around having not just their desire return, but return much higher, and especially so soon after loss. That's actually that is also physiological. So there's other parts, there's emotional parts to it as well that we'll talk about. But that part right there, your body just experienced such loss and such a drop in all of like the happy chemicals, it's going to do whatever it can to feel good, right? So it will seek out neurotransmitters and hormones, the good ones like dopamine. It will seek out endorphins. It will seek out oxytocin. The body's smart. It like knows how to like access those chemicals and those hormones. So it's smart. It knows that one way to do that is by having sex. Okay. So that's just like your body being like, things are really bleak and bad right now. This could help.